Okay, well, welcome everybody to our Courageous Career Conversations workshop today. This is part 2 of a 3-part series we're doing, kind of straddling winter quarter and spring quarter. So we had our part 1 back in January, which Kimfer will refer to a little bit, and we'll link to it. So if you missed that one, you can access it because it was really great. Today is part 2, and our topic today is how to approach interviews to get to the heart of a company's culture, DEI, and more. My name is Megan Spalding, and I'm the director of the Albers Placement Center. The Albers Placement Center is the career center for the business school. And we are doing this series in partnership with our wonderful counterparts, the Career Engagement Office. They're the career center serving arts and sciences and science and engineering. I know Carol Lawali, the director, is here. Carol, you want to say a quick hi? I'm catching
Good afternoon, everyone.
Sorry, I didn't tell you you'd be talking.
Good
to see you, Carol.
Happy to be here. Good to see you too. Looking forward to this.
So without further ado, let me introduce our wonderful speaker. Our whole series, we are lucky to have Kimfer doing this series for us. She's got so much wisdom and knowledge and experience in these realms. So we're really grateful for her doing 3 workshops for us. So a little background, Kimfer Flannery Rye is the founder and principal consultant for Inclusion Equals, a social enterprise focused on the idea, and idea is all caps. She's going to explain it later, but basically inclusion equals diversity plus equity plus accessibility. And the focus of her enterprise is to build culture from the inside out and to address systemic issues that we must tackle the inequities within organizational systems is kind of the whole idea of her business. Kimfer is a seasoned professional with 20 plus years of experience with a diverse background in digital marketing, executive leadership, and organizational development, to name a few. And then we're very fortunate because she's very engaged with Seattle U. She's an adjunct professor teaching creativity and innovation for MBA students. She has her MBA in executive leadership from Seattle U, and then she's also in our a mentor in our Albers Mentor program. So thank you, Kimfer, for all that you do. Thanks for being here today, and I will turn it over to you.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if I see some familiar faces from last session or not. So if you were in the last session, you're going to get a bit of a preview or review of a few things. But if you are new to it, I always love to start the introduction with just more at the personal level. I know Megan just gave you a spiel of pretty much my resume or whatnot. But I think, these scenarios, it's kind of hard when you are listening to someone for at least an hour and that's all you see is like these, like resume information. So instead, I like to share some information about you. I am in some of my intersections. I am a Korean American. I was adopted when I was 10 years old from South Korea and then into a Iowa farm community in the Midwest, into a white family. I am part of the LGBTQIA community, however, have a very, I would say outwardly, like very straight looking life, as I have married a cisgendered straight man and been married for, it'll be 25 years this year, turning 50 and 25 years of marriage. I am also a mother to a beautiful son named Sawyer, who is 15 and over 6 feet tall already, which I don't understand where that's coming from. And then also have adopted a COVID puppy. His name is Yeti. And we thought we were getting a 40-pound dog, and he is a 70-pound dog. And that our Roro, our Rodeo, the cat that we've had that also is a rescue, decided that was not his favorite addition to the family, no matter how much Yeti wants to play. I also do speaking engagements across internationally as well as locally. And most recently, I've was able to speak at the World Economic Forum for the second year in the role. So that was a bit of a amazing experience in Davos, Switzerland. So that's a bit about me that's outside of just my resume information. Okay, so we are part of an educational system. So we will be looking at agenda. We need to know what we're doing. And then we'll be talking about, of course, the land acknowledgement, as well as the learning objective, because can't be a good at an educational system without a bit of the pedagogy in there. And then also we'll do a quick breakout session, a debrief, and then just looking at what's coming up next. So I'm guessing this is pretty standard practice for many of you. Just wanted to make sure that we are acknowledging the land that we reside in. At least here for me, I'm not sure if you're all dialing in from Seattle today, but we are on the great ancestral land of the Duwamish people. And we want to make sure that we honor their land and the way that we get to borrow, have stolen, but borrow in the land. I myself pay rent to the real Duwamish, and it's something that you can do because I'm a consultant. I don't need an office, so I pay what it would cost me about the same amount as a co-working space to the Duwamish each month as my rent back to the tribe. And then if you are coming or dialing in from somewhere else, there's always that native-land.ca that you can see where which part of the ancestral land that you were part of. Also, this month, as we know, is Black History Month. Just want to make sure that we call that out, and we're coming towards the end, but as we should all know, not just February is Black History Month. Every day is Black History Month, and this theme this year is considered Black resistance. So make sure you're doing your part to really understand what is going on in the Black community in the past and historically, and what's going on in the current situation. So with that, here we are, our learning objectives. So these sessions, if you joined us last time, you'll know these are really practical sessions. Right? There's really practicality around what you can do. And that's what these sessions are really built. So it's not really about high level discussions about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but rather how do we use that lens in which we do more of a day-to-day tactical activities. Okay. So hopefully when you leave, you will have gained ways to safely ask questions to get to the heart of the company culture, and how do you sort of gauge that information, assess the validity of their DEI commitment, and then hopefully with a greater confidence to evaluate if that company is right for you. So those are the things that hopefully you will be able to walk away with from today. Again, if you were here last time for part one, some of this is going to look a little familiar, but I just wanted to make sure that we start off with everyone with similar shared language, so that way we are sort of starting in the same baseline. So again, if you were here prior, think of it as just a refresh. And for those of you that are just signing in for the first time, know that you didn't need the last session, but it'll give you a little bit more context as well. So again, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's multitude of ways that people explain diversity, equity, and inclusion, but these are two that I really like the best because they're simple. They get to the heart of things. One of my favorite is the quote by Arthur Chan, and he talks about diversity is a fact. And I love that, right? Because you can take demographics data, you can take any of that information, and you can spit out a report. Equity is a choice, meaning you get to choose if you want to do fair treatment, provide access and opportunity to do others. And then inclusion is an action. So if you think about it as the action to do, this is where oftentimes that allyship comes in. You can't just wear a badge as being an ally. You have to actually, it's a verb, right? You gotta take action to make that happen. And ultimately, then belonging is the outcome that comes out of it. So if you are thinking about diving into your new career or shifting in your career, you want to think about, like, are these important for you as you jump into your next role, or maybe your first role? And then, since we're talking about DEI and culture are really, I think, integrated. I think about culture as being the heart and soul of an organization. So if we're looking at a culture, is that, if you don't think about the impactful way that DEI is integrated, it just kind of takes a life of its own, right? So then it can affect not only your internal brand, but your external brand. So I like to say, if you think about what happened after George Floyd's murder in 2020 and all the racial justice activities that were going on at that time, anytime companies wrote their promises and commitments and all the things, literally it was the employees in those organizations was the first ones to raise their hand and call BS on them, right? That's not actually how our organization works, etc. So again, if you're joining an organization, these are some of the things that you're going to want to look at. And so if we're looking at then culture, you have to remember culture is beyond, right? What people think of it as, like, oh, we have lunches on Fridays, or we have sodas in the cafeteria, or whatever it is. Organization culture is really the identity, the values, the beliefs, and the interactions that are happening in implicit ways and explicit ways, right? So explicit would be like, hey, we have values, we have mission, we have all of those things. But what happens oftentimes is like, well, maybe those are really awesome posters on your walls, but people act differently and they act against that values, right? So that's the implicit thing. Those are the things that, it's not on any policy or guidelines, but it's just people tell you that's how it's done around here, right? So those are the things that's hard to kind of capture and get the information when you are in that interview stage and trying to get that information. Okay. So with that, if you were not part of the first session, Megan just put a link on the chat for you so that you have access to the information. This is one of the really tactical evaluation an audit checklist that we provided for people. That's just an individual checklist. If you are looking at other companies and you want to evaluate, obviously, if you have some insider knowledge, that'll be amazing. But if you don't, all you have is public information, right? Their website, their social media, what's on Glassdoor or whatnot. So it gives you a practical guide to do that initial research to see, hey, do I even want to engage with this company, right? And so that document is available for you as well, okay? And I encourage everyone, if you are thinking about a company, do that, right? It also gives you an opportunity to go, is this a deal breaker or not for me? Yeah. So then as we're thinking about now, the next step, you are trying to get to the heart of the organizational culture and how their DEI functions, right? So you've already done the research. You're like, hey, I'm going to make that step. I'm going to take that next step into applying. You applied and congratulations. They're like, yes, let's interview. Awesome, right? So then what we're really thinking about is how do you get some of those questions answered that you're curious about, you want to know, but you're not sure, can you or should you ask, right? Hopefully there are certain things that you should be keeping in mind as they're asking you questions, because one of the things that people tend to forget when you're going through interview is that you're also interviewing them, right? It's not just one-sided. You shouldn't be there hoping that they'll just grab you, right? Any job, but rather you should also be thinking, are you good enough for me to bring myself to your work to add value to you? Yeah. So if you're preparing for those interviews, the kind of questions that they ask you may also kind of help you try to identify, oh, is this the kind of place I want to work at? But then you also have to think about what are the kind of questions I want to ask them. So when they say, do you have any questions? First and foremost, has anyone ever said no and said, thank you so much, you provided all the information, etc.? Yeah. Well, don't do that. If you've ever done that in the past, don't do that. You should always have questions for them. One, because it shows that you're interested, that you've done the research, that you want to know more, and that you know something about them as well. Okay. So if we are looking at questions, obviously, most of the time, the interview is going to be done in a way where they're going to use up majority of that time, right? But remember, during the interview, you can also be asking them questions as they're asking you questions. And so being prepared for, do you have any questions? That could also be throughout the interview. And the way that you can think about that is in, there's multiple categories, right? But I like to say, like, trying to remember more than 4 gets a little hairy in your mind. You can only take so much. So think about these in 4 kind of categories. 1, how do I ask the questions to really get to the culture, right? 2, how do I really get in there to really understand their DEI? 3, what are some of those employee development focused questions? And 4, what is the interviewer's perspective? That also shows that you are hearing from them, you're interested in them, and what are their perspective? Because if you don't have insights in there, guess what? They're the first person that you're going to get insights from about that company. So those are 4 areas in which you can kind of think through. Will you be able to ask all those questions? Probably not, right? But it's getting you prepared so that way, as you're thinking about while you're in the interview and you're having that conversation, if you kind of break these down in these buckets, it'll help you to ask questions in the moment and or be prepared about the kind of questions that they might be asking you as well. Okay, so how then do we look at this? So here are some things from your side that you want to prepare. So if you are looking at culture-focused questions, the things that you want to really think about and ask are their employee engagement surveys. Even things like questions like, how often do you do your employee engagement surveys? If they say, oh, I don't know when the last time we did one, that kind of tells you something, right? 1, like, oh, do you care that your employees have something to say? 2, do you make any kind of actions or changes by what your employees have to, are involved in, etc. So that's kind of gives you a clue, right? If they don't have an answer for that. If they say, oh, we do it annually or we do it quarterly or whatnot, the follow-up question that you might consider are like, oh, are those public information? Would you be willing to share with me the engagement, like not necessarily the score, but have they been improving? Have you seen where areas that employees are really feeling engaged and connected with the company, or where areas that the company is looking to improve, right? Those are all legitimate questions that you can ask, right? The other thing is around the pandemic response, asking them about, what was it like for you as an organization? What was the pandemic response like, the hybrid model? How has that been for you? Has it been a smooth transition? I know it's been difficult for a lot of organization. What has that been like for you as an organization and for you personally, right? So you can kind of bridge those 2 questions there, and then asking about the post-pandemic re-entry strategy. So how is that happening now? Obviously, the pandemic response initially, a lot of companies didn't know how to do that, right? So then the things that you're looking for, what you're trying to tease out is like, even if they said, you know what, it was super hectic, we didn't quite understand how it was going to happen. However, we were able to X, Y, and Z. We heard from people, right? We figured out how to really track with each other on virtually. We're trying to do these things, and these will kind of bridge into that culture and DEI stuff too. Is like we've figured out how to do even sort of team building through virtually, et cetera, right? So those are sort of those key identifiers that you're looking for. And then around the post-pandemic reentry strategy, there's been a lot of companies that have said everyone's got to come back, until the employees said, hell's no, right? They're like, that's not happening. And so just hearing about the way that they talk about it, or in what way, right? So you're looking for the thoughtful way in which they are listening to their employees or have shifted because of it, right? And then talking about the company values, hopefully you've done your research, right? So you already should be able to, if it's public, have those values already written. What you might want to ask are things like, what are the values that really shows up most in your organization? And what are those values that really you can see it living and breathing in your organization? Right. And if they kind of stumble and go, and have to go like, oh, what are our values? Again, key there, right? That's probably not such an embedded factor in their organization. The other thing is around access to leadership. So how often do, and this has to do with also employee development focus, but how often skip levels happen? The open door policy, what are those policy about access to leadership? You can listen for things like, well, we really like you to talk with your manager before you talk to their manager, right? That tells you it's a very hierarchical organization, and you might be okay with that. So it's really about teasing out as much information as possible for you to see where's your threshold of what you're looking for and how you want to engage there. Okay. Before I go on to the next topic, anyone have thoughts or questions, things that maybe you've tried that have worked or not? Or feel afraid to ask? Anyone thought that you could ask any of these kind of questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if so you ask about the employee engagement surveys and then they say no, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to give a bad taste in their mouth either.
That's true. That's true. So with those scenarios, you can ask, are there other ways that you gauge employee feedback, right? And usually they're going to have something, right? But it's a good way to sort of move past that awkwardness. And the thing is, ultimately it's going to be about you. Is that a deal breaker for you that they take, and if you're finding out oh no, we do things we do employee focus groups instead, or we have listening lounges, or they might be able to tell you, we don't do that, but we do this, then it'll kind of give you an opportunity. But if it does go into an awkward scenario, you can just say, oh, great. I hope, well, thank you for that information. I have another question for you. Right? So just transition away. Yeah. Yeah. Good question, though. Those awkward moments of transition. All right.
Kimfer, I appreciate these because when we're coaching on interviews, I'll often say, ask the interviewer, what do you feel the company culture is like? That's a pretty loaded question. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on them to convey that. So I like these because these are elements of culture.
Yes.
You can get to that are a little more tangible than just this overarching,
Yeah. So that I tend to not ask that. Tell me about your culture. Or how do you like the culture? Right? It's too broad, too big. And so, yeah, these are broken down so that you can get elements of it. So all of these, even though they're sort of broken out into these subgroups, they're really still getting to the heart of the overall culture, right? The first bucket is just more specifically culture driven, but answers for every one of those other sections are also really talking about the company culture. Yeah. All right. Naomi?
Yeah, so I have had like for me, I see it's not just the company. I see relationship between you and your manager is super important. And I've had instances where I try to see like what that person values and how it might show up at work. And how, like, I don't know, it's just difficult because even if you ask like, hey, do you micromanage? Oftentimes that person won't be like, yes, I love to micromanage. Like, I have difficulties like eking out or understanding like what the true nature of working with someone in like a short interview. And like, and oftentimes I feel like that affects me more DEI wise than like the entire company, more like those one-on-one relationships.
That is a great insight, Naomi. So there's a aspect of company culture that I do speaking engagements with clients on. It's called the microculture. So every people manager, intentionally or unintentionally, most of the time unintentionally, create their own microcultures within an organization. Okay. And because they have impact and influence on a group of people, and because of that occurs. And then there's lots of studies out there about how people leave their managers, not their job, right? Or the company. And so one of the questions, so almost always when you're doing interviews, the hiring manager will be part of your interview list. Yeah. So when you find out you are speaking with a hiring manager, one of the questions that I like to ask them is, tell me a little bit about your management philosophy. Tell me about how you and the team engage. What are your team meetings like? Do you have regular one-on-one cadences? And these are things that they'll be able to tell you when they're like, oh, well, we meet, when things are needed. That tells me that it's someone who's not cultivating a team, right? Or if they say, oh, they can come and talk to me whenever that they want. We don't have anything formal. That probably tells me it's someone who's very hands-off. Right. So that means you have to be really proactively driven. And if that's not you and you need a little bit more hand-holding, especially if it's your beginning, like in the early stages of your career, that might not actually be a good thing for you. But for some people, they're like, oh, thank goodness, I love that. Like hands off, I can manage my stuff and then get back to you as I need. So there are specific questions you can ask around hiring managers that are a little different than these like broad stroke questions. So hiring managers, you can put in sort of in the interviewer's perspective question, right? So I kept it pretty light, and maybe I'll add that, Megan, on the a bullet point. If it's the hiring manager, here are some questions that you can ask, right? And so that has to do with team management, has to do with, again, management philosophy. For me, when I was a manager, I managed at the agency that I worked at when I was the vice president and executive creative director. I had a team of about a little over 80 people on my team, which meant I had multiple directors that reported up to me. It was very important for me that every one of my directors and their people managers had what my management philosophy is, and that they had a deck around it, and everyone understood that, and every onboarding process had that for employees as well. Okay. And so not to say I was the best of the managers, but when you're a good manager, you're going to think about those things, right? And have answers around what's my philosophy around management or my team. Hopefully that helps, Naomi. Okay.
It's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, and when we're talking about the DEI questions, again, hopefully you've done that research, you've already seen the things, that checklist that is available for you. So you might already know, DEI metrics are published or unpublished. So if they are published, you can ask them more questions about it. Hey, can you tell me more about what your goals are in moving these, or how much has it moved since these goals were set? Do you have employee resource groups, or some companies call them business resource groups? If you saw them online, then you can say, like, how do you join them? How big are they? What kind of activities do they do or not do? If you don't see anything about them, you can ask those questions, and they may say, I'm sorry, we don't have it. We're thinking about it. Maybe you can say, oh, is that something that would be open for employees to start something like that? Right. So those are ways to see, like, how flexible are they around that. You can also find out about, like, what are your companies celebrate? Have you been celebrating Black History Month? Are you celebrating Women's History Month? Are you celebrating Diwali? Are you, like, so all of these things you can kind of like poke around to see, are they even really doing anything around these? I mean, literally, there's something for every month, and companies that do really think about DEI have a DEI calendar in which they really share information and provide access for people and knowledge around that. Okay. Also, what's interesting around DEI, also culture, is really finding out companies giving, their giving and philanthropy programs and how they make those kind of decisions. You might find out a lot of companies will have employee nominated ones. Some companies would be like, oh, because our company is really, we're really tech-based, and because of that, we are really looking at giving and doing philanthropy around women in tech, women in STEM, or stuff like that, right? So you'll start understanding, like, how are they approaching their DEI by what and who they give to their philanthropy in tied to what their company businesses are, right? And then regarding employee development, these questions are also great. Like, hey, tell me more about your employee development process. Do you have funds? Do you support trainings independently or internally? What's available? You can also talk about what is a general path of advancement would look like, and are there historical of people moving through, and what does that look like? Ask questions about one-on-ones and skip levels with other leadership, and do they have coaching available? What about a mentorship program? How often do people move around the company laterally? And are there opportunities for special projects? These all show you companies that have a strong culture in which they are supportive of their employees, right? Again, these are all signifiers. And so we're assuming that you still won't have all the insights until you get there, but sort of picking out some of these things will be helpful. And again, you're not going to be able to ask all of these questions. So you're going to have to figure out what is important to me. And those are the ones that you want to sort of set, and then also figure out, they may answer them for you throughout your while they're asking you questions, right? And so there's all of that. The interviewer's perspective, I think, is super important because it engages them personally. So one of the things that I think is really great is finding out, like, why did they join? Why did they join the company? You know, what brought them there? What has kept them there? You know, what is the reason for wanting to stay there? And people that are really interested, really loving the company, they'll say, like, oh, I love the people here, I love the company, et cetera, right? Those are one of those immediate things that you'll see people answer. People who have to kind of do the also shows you something, like that they're trying to figure out what is appropriate to tell you, right? Maybe they're like, they don't actually love being there, but because you asked them that question, they're like, oh, let me think about that, right? Most people who love their company don't have to think about it. They'll just, like, immediately tell you what that is. Okay. And then things like, hey, tell me about what your average day looks like, or maybe an average day would look like from, you know, for you, your peers, your colleagues. What happens on a challenging day? What happens then? What does that look like? How does the company support, or your manager, or et cetera, your colleagues? Those are some of those questions that are available out there. Any additional questions or thoughts before we move forward? Oh yeah, Rebecca.
One I like to ask him for, this might fall into employee development, but how is performance evaluated? Like what's in, you know, what is valued in terms of how employees, I think that can tell a lot about culture too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's I think of that as part of the employee development.
Yeah.
Just generally, right? Reviews are part of that, right? And so definitely, I think it's something that you should think about and look at and consider asking. So here's a question that also comes up often. You know, here's the do's and don'ts. It's not always as clear cut. During an interview, do you or don't you ask about accommodations? Do you or don't you disclose any accommodation needs? What are your thoughts here?
I feel like this is a really difficult topic for people who have like mental or physical disabilities, because like a lot of people can be under or unemployed because of that, and like you might not feel comfortable sharing that if you feel like it's going to affect your chances, but it also isn't necessarily fair if you're already at a disadvantage in how you show up to an interview or to work or just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. There's already barriers that are happening. I think oftentimes people who are living with various disabilities, right, just the interview process itself, right? Sometimes asking for accommodations for the interview is already a tough line, let alone these questions. So what's interesting is that there's no clear cut, actually. I wish that I can say like yes or no on these. They're not clear cut because one, technically, they can't ask you from a legality perspective, they can't technically ask you this, right? Do you need accommodations? Oh, they could if you were like interviews, like, oh, what kind of accommodations could we make for you for the interviews to happen? They can ask sort of generality questions. They can't ask you for specifics unless you want to disclose. I don't know enough about the law, so don't take my word on all the details here. But it's really up to you in how comfortable you feel and how important it is for you how the company responds to you and your needs, right? So I have a good friend who part of her accommodation needs is not necessarily because of her any physical or mental disability on her own. For her is a no-go deal if a company will not be flexible about her needing to manage her hours when she needs to pick up her kids, drop her kids off, or if they're sick or whatever. For her, being a mom is one of the #1 priorities for her and is non-negotiable. She will tell them she has children and she wants to understand what is that, the true nature of that. And because for her, again, it's a no-go, right? If companies are like, well, and they don't have a good answer, right? So this is the part is like, what is go, no go for you and what you want to disclose or not disclose? Because you don't technically have to disclose even about being a mother, right? Because some people could discriminate you because of that. And so for her, it's like, it's also testing. Like, are you going to be that kind of a company? I don't even want to work for you anyway. So you might as well know, let's get this out on the, out in the open. Yeah. So those are some of those things that are going to be more internal for you to figure out, that I don't have clear-cut answers for you because I don't know what's a no-go or go for you. But I just wanted to address this question because that one comes up a lot when people are talking about, can I or should I or not, right? Disclose something. Again, is that going to help you make a decision about, is that the right kind of place or not? And it's hard when you're coming from a place where you're like, no, I just need to get a job, which tends to be in a place of when we can't come from a place of abundance, right? Abundance meaning like, oh, you know what, if this doesn't work, something else is going to happen, because abundance is also a privilege. Sometimes it's a mindset, but it's also a privilege, because if you're in a scarcity, oh my gosh, no, I gotta meet my my rent next month. The whole abundance mindset is a little bit harder to like really manage, right? So I know people love to throw those words around a lot, but we understand like there's realities of how you can kind of bring that forward. Yeah. Okay. All right. So there's a couple of things we can do right now. So we have 15 minutes left. One, I was going to put you in a breakout room to kind of talk to each other about what's a go, no go for you. Okay. And then Megan has a worksheet that I've created. Again, these are all tactical, practical sessions. Yeah. So that way you can kind of figure out what are those things, and what are those questions that I want to ask in meetings, in these interviews, so that way I have it with me and it's really embedded in my core, if that makes sense. Do everyone feel like they like to at least take 10 minutes and just do that, just have conversation? Why is that even a deal breaker for you or no? If so, let's get folks in the breakout room. If you prefer that we have a group conversation a little bit more about that, we can do that too. Thoughts? I'm going to leave it up to the group here.
Why don't you guys throw in the chat if you'd rather do large group or breakout rooms?
We're at that really interesting size where we can go, either way. I know it's a really strange time, it's like the 30-minute in between sometimes. Okay. Great. Okay, I'm starting to see a bit of large group. So Megan, so everyone go to that Google Drive link that she put on there and grab that spreadsheet. This is really tiny, but it looks like that. So what I did for you all to make this, again, practical is that there are, first of all, you can do all the research you like. There's multitudes of things out there. These are some that I really like, and they're recent. And I think they're actually that 57 smart questions actually breaks down even further groupings, right? And I think those are really great ones. So there's resources available for you to think about, hey, oh, this question really resonates with me. This question really resonates with me. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of like do your pre-work before you go into an interview session. And then I also put in a couple of preparing for an interview, meaning to get your mind ready and body ready. So anyone who is familiar with Amy Cuddy's like power poses, I'm a huge fan of the power poses. I do those before I even have workshops like these. I'll do my power poses just to get myself and my body ready. And then there's also mental exercises and creative brainstorming exercises just to get your brain in exercise mode, so you can go into that as well, which is really great. But what I really like for you to do is think about these 4 sections, right? And think about if you had to do this, I mean, as you're doing this, what are those at least three questions that you would actually break into each one of these sections that's important for you, right? What is sort of something that will help you as a go, no go kind of a decision? And it's important to write them down. There's something to be said about, there's like a, from your brain to your kinesthetically writing down, there is a different kind of brain process that happens that helps you codify information versus sort of just letting your brain think. I'm like, oh, I have these 3 questions in my head. they're actually, your brain actually leaves them a lot more fluffy in there. You think it's clear, but it's not when it comes down to it. And so writing things down is super, super, super helpful. Okay. I'd love to hear from people, like, what are some of like go no-goes for you? Do you have some go no-goes when you feel like you're interviewing? Yeah. Yep. It changes over time for sure. Yeah. Yeah. You know what's been interesting? I love this phrasing. I had one of my managers, one of the founders at the agency that I worked at, and it stuck with me. She's like, I call BS on work-life balance. And I thought, oh, here we go. As like my red flags went like, blah, blah, blah. And she said, because what that really means is that business can really, that work-life balance, she said, it means that business doesn't want you to invade your space while you're out at work, meaning like you're at work and then you're at home, right? But what it is like, but you go home, even though it's supposed to be balanced, they can still reach out to you, even though if you're at work, you can't take time off to go do the things that you need to do. And so she used to say, like, I rather think of it as work-life integration, how you can integrate your life in and out of your work, and your life and your work is the best way to manage, especially if you are privileged enough to not to be in a clock in, clock out kind of a work, right? That means you should be in more of a project based. And so, getting your work done, how do you get it done is much more important than when and your butt in the seat kind of scenario. And so for me, as a no-go, it's finding a company that's that. Like, I can work from where I need to. If I need to work at 9 o'clock at night, rather than at 8 in the morning, not to say like I'm going to make other people work around me on meetings. I will join those that are needed. But if I like that flexibility of the swing hours, because I'm not very regulated person. The 95 it kind of kills my spirit, versus my partner loves that. Boom, morning, lunch break, afternoon, scheduled, done, right? Doesn't like having that, like, that open-endedness. So it all depends on where we're at. So yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, when I used to work in corporate, I would ask the question, when are people typically in the office?
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely interesting to see how people respond to that. So
Yeah,
I get the like, oh, people, the standard office hours are from this time to this time, but people come and go. And then we're here till 6. So it just depends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is why, like, part of this conversation today is here's some frameworks in which you want to work from, but you really have to kind of dig in and say, like, can I live with that? And also, it's okay if you want to live with that, because you can change it later. I think the whole idea is that it's not one and only job that you can have. So.
Amy, I know you had your hand up. Did you want to ask your question?
Oh, I just was going to share one of the questions that I would probably ask now, based on my experience that I've currently had is just how does your team celebrate achievement, either on a personal level or a group level? And what does that look like? So I think based on my experience in my current team, since we do, I think, a good job at celebrating each other, that's probably something I would ask completely going forward. And I think that gets a little bit at the culture too, and
Yeah.
personal development. So I was like, oh, I think that's a new question I'm going to ask.
I love that. That's a really good one, especially if you are, if you really love the collaborativeness of a team. If you're like you're an independent worker and you're like, oh, I love having a team, but it's not unnecessary. I don't need to celebrate to get like, that might not be a good one for you to ask, right? But like for someone who's yes, that cohesiveness of a group and celebration, and also I always like to know like what happens if it doesn't go well. What happens with the team? Like, how does the team support you or not? Like, what is that? Because it's always easy when it's good. When going gets good, you're like, yeah. But it's the other part is like, where does the blame and shame happen? You know? Yeah. Oh, well, I think that gives you a little bit of a culture answer right there. It's amazing how you get a lot of answers sometimes in the way that they answer and how they answer gives you lots of insights around the company and their inclusive or belonging states, how their culture functions. And I've had also interviews where the interviewer had all the great answers, right? But it was as if they practiced it. And I had a hard time, like, I don't know if this is sincere or if it's like company managed propaganda of some sort. So, yeah. So always think of it as, I always say, like, try to shift the idea of it's a benefit that you get to interview with multiple people rather than a stress, because now you get to hear from multiple people how consistent I'm hearing things, right? Because I think oftentimes we do approach interviews as if like, okay, I'm on the big old spotlight. If you flip it and go, no, I'm interviewing them, I want to know about that, it also takes some of that stress off of you, right? Yeah. Well, I love this group that just hung on. I know it's once you go into that whole like, oh, I can go do my own thing part, it gets a little bit harder. But thank you all so much for hanging out. And yeah, hopefully the tactical and practical steps are helpful. And we'll do the next one. I think in that Google is the first session, all that information's there. And then the next one is in April 6th. So we did the whole, like, how do you research before to see if you actually want to submit in anything to a company? Now we got the interview. The next one will be, okay, now I'm in the company, now what? Right? So that would be what we'll be doing on the third session. All right.
Kimfer, thank you.
Yeah.
I wrote down a ton of notes and I do this for a living.
I'm glad.
Coaching. This is so helpful. Thank you everybody for coming. I posted a little bit up in the chat. We have a YouTube playlist that we post all our workshops on. So if you had a friend that couldn't come, or you just want to see it again, or see some of those great question or types of things to address under each column, that was super helpful for me. If you want to go back and see that, we'll have that posted in a couple of days, also with a link to the interview worksheet show. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful for you. Thank you, everybody. And please put April 6th on your calendar. We'll email and remind you about it too. But thank you for joining us. And like the two sponsors today, Albert's Placement Center, Career Engagement Office, we are here to help support you in your career planning and exploration journeys. So if you're a business major, please reach out to Albert's Placement Center. If you're in arts and sciences or science and engineering, Career Engagement Office, we like to partner on these workshops a couple of times a year, but we're here to help you with your individual needs anytime. So just go search us in the Seattle U website and we'll be happy to meet with you. But thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Kimfer.
Yeah, it was nice to see you all. See you in April.